Hello and welcome to Center Home Groups. I'm really glad you've joined us today. And really, we don't have a lot of announcements right now, except something we've been talking about on Sunday mornings recently. Upcoming, we do backpack blessings. We do this on a regular basis to help support those families in need from Lincoln Elementary School right next door to us. And we're having a yearly, basically a gathering of items, macaroni and cheese, these backpack blessings. We're going to put together packs that will last them all the weekends throughout the year. And that's coming up the weekend of March 8th and 9th. So we really would love for you to be a part of this. It's great for the whole family. As well, we're having a prayer vigil that you could take a 15-minute section or two to pray for our missionaries and people around the church during that entire weekend. So the sign-ups are at Center Church. We'd love for you to get involved in that, be in life in the church. And just because we haven't talked about this, do you know that our band 15th Hour has a new CD out? And you can buy their CD. It's really fantastic, and you need to get one. So see Jacob or Daniel or Michael, and they can tell you how to buy one of those. 15th Hour. Have a good study. So when I think of the continuation that we're doing here from the last week when we continued our series on Sermon on the Mount and fulfillment of the law, the only thing I could come up with that was close to that is I've been in dermatology pharmaceutical sales for over 20 years now. And during that time, I've had times where I've sold multiple products, trying to get multiple products to a particular provider, a PA, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, and trying to convince them to prescribe or do something with that. And so there are times that I'm talking to somebody at maybe a lunch or a time at an office space where I'm telling them about one product on acne, then I'm talking about a product on rosacea and something else. I'm trying to give these different points. They're all important. They're all going to be helpful. So, like I said, it's the one thing I can think of when I think about Jesus sitting down on the mountainside. We have all these people, a multitude of people just sitting out waiting for him to hear his wisdom, talking about what's most important in his ministry. What did he come to do? So let's look back what we did last week of the fulfillment of the law. And I just want to look at one verse. That was chapter 5 of Matthew, verse 17, where Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets." He's like, I didn't come to take away anything that God has stated before. You see, I have not come to abolish them, but I came to fulfill them. So now we're going to go forward. We're going to go to verse 31, where it says, "It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce." So when Jesus says it has been said, he's talking about what Moses and the commands have been said about divorce before, and he's wanting to clarify this because you see, in Jesus' day, many people interpreted the Mosaic permission for divorce told in Deuteronomy 24:1 as granting virtually any reason as grounds for divorce. And some rabbis taught this even extended the allowing a man to divorce his wife if she burnt his breakfast. Now, I got that from some commentary, and I thought, man, how bad do you want to get rid of your wife if she burns your breakfast and say, you know what, honey, we're done. I'm going on to the next one. Anyhow, that's kind of how things could be done back then. So Jesus tells him, but I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Think about how harsh that would be for the woman and the man. So I want to read what Pastor Michael says from gotquestions.org. I know Pastor Dan and I and Jacob have used this before. It really helps explain some things about divorce. And this particular pastor says, stay true to your vows. Prove yourself to be a man or a woman of integrity by not abandoning the most sacred of all human relationships. So stop giving the unbelieving world an excuse to blaspheme God, as told in Romans 2:24. So don't subject your children to the pain of divorce, because ultimately there's no way to avoid that. Don't subject your parents to the pain of divorce. Don't subject yourself to the pain of divorce. Stop destroying what is intended to illustrate Christ's undying affection for the church, as told in Ephesians 5:22 through 33. So forgive, don't forsake. Build, don't abandon. Love, don't leave. Now that I have had this opportunity to vent a little, here again, this is the pastor from Got Questions. He says, don't get me wrong. I entirely understand that many people try everything to save their marriage, and the marriage still ends in divorce. You see, if one spouse is hell-bent on getting a divorce, there is ultimately nothing the other spouse can do to stop it. He goes, I also entirely recognize that being married to certain people is painful, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. I'm not telling an abused spouse that he or she must remain with the abuser. I am not saying that a spouse has to live with a serial adulterer. You see, my rant is directed towards those who are abandoning their marriages for no good cause. My rant is directed toward those who are causing the divorce. My rant is directed toward those who have fallen out of love with their spouse and have decided that they need to find their true soulmate. It is to those people that God hates divorce. Malachi 2:16 is directed to. You see, along with this, though, I think it's important to know that sometimes divorce happens. I'm married to somebody who has been divorced before. Sexual immorality was part of that before. But God, just like anything else that we fall short of God's directive and God's best, as tough as that is, God will forgive us. So if you've been through a divorce, and just know that for whatever reason, if we come out and ask for forgiveness, He will forgive us from that. So now let's go to the next section, the next part, where he's talking about oaths. So what does it mean about oath? Well, in verse 33, he says, again, you have heard it said that to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. Commentary tells us the scribes and the Pharisees had twisted the law. That's shocking, right? You should not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, which was told in Exodus 27, to permit taking virtually every other name in a false oath. Then it goes on to verse 36. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot even make one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. You see, anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So what does this mean? You see, having to swear or make oaths betray the weakness of your word. It demonstrates that there is not enough weight in your own character to confirm your words. How much better is it to say, or let your yes be yes and your no be no? Then he goes on, an eye for an eye, which you've probably heard this one before. Going on, he goes, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Here again, if we go back to the Mosaic law, it did teach an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth in Exodus 21:24. But over time, religious teachers moved this command out of its proper sphere, a principle basically limiting retribution for the civil government, and he put it in the wrong sphere as an obligation as in personal relationships. He goes on in verse 39, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. You see, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek. I mean, I think of Jesus. You know, I've seen video of this, but we see in Scripture when Jesus is arrested, right? When he's getting ready to be crucified and tortured, you know, they slap him on the cheek. And he tells us, turn the other cheek. And we look at commentary here as well. It says, it is wrong to think that Jesus means a physical attack cannot be resisted or defended against. You see, when Jesus speaks of a slap on your right cheek, it was culturally understood as a deep insult, not really a physical attack. Jesus does not mean that if someone hits across the right side of your head with a baseball bat, we should allow them then to hit the left side. If a right-handed person strikes somebody's right cheek, presumably is a slap by the back of the hand, probably considered more insulting than a slap with an open palm. This was from theologian Carson in 2 Corinthians 11:20. So probably has in mind this kind of insult slap. That's what they would have been talking about. And it's also wrong to think that Jesus means that there is no place for punishment or retribution in society. You see, Jesus here speaks to personal relationships and not to the proper functions of government in restraining evil, as told in Romans 13:1-4. I must turn my cheek when I am personally insulted, but the government has a responsibility to restrain the evil man from physical assault. And going on in verse 40. And if anyone, here again Jesus talking, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, well, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go a mile, then go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now, the greatest example of this, and I'm not going to show this here, but I think I've shown it in one of the studies we've done here before. In The Chosen, they show a series when he's talking about going extra mile. The Jewish people back in that culture, were asked by the Romans, they had to, wherever they were at, if a Roman soldier came up and said, you need to carry my gear, they had to carry it for a mile, but nothing more. After that mile, they could lay it down and go about their separate ways. But in The Chosen, we get to see this play out where Jesus is asked to do that, him and his disciples, and he takes their gear. But when they say, okay, we can take that back, he says, no, he tells his disciples, we're going to take it an extra mile because we are different than those around us. And he wanted to teach them a lesson. And the last part of this is love your enemies, love for enemies. This would have been so culturally different than what they had heard before. Because in verse 43, it says, you have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. You see, he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who only love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that, right? It's so easy to love people who love you back. I want to share something from Glenn's devotions, one of my favorite daily devotions. And he goes, 23 times in the New Testament, we are commanded to love each other. 23 times. Think about that. So can feelings be commanded? They cannot. But behaviors can be commended and attitudes can be deliberately cultivated. In the Bible, love means seeking the good of other people, even if we never have warm or positive feelings toward them. For many of us, this may be the very word we need to hear concerning certain family members, sometimes family members that are hard to get along with. We don't love other people because they are attractive or lovable. We love them because God has poured his own love into our hearts. And his call is for us to be in relationship with other people by seeking their highest good, just as God seeks our highest good at every turn. Great lovers aren't those who can't stay away from each other. They are people who by God's grace learns to keep a lid on their anger, who are patient longer than they ever thought was possible, who get excited about somebody else's big day, who refuse to keep records of emotional hurts. So I want to close by just saying this. I believe this entire sermon, in my opinion, this entire sermon, the whole Sermon on the Mount, including today's section that we're covering, is Jesus just emphasizing the greatest command that he will later talk about actually in his ministry later on in Matthew and the other Gospels. And basically, he's reminding them, you know what, guys? Everything you've heard, all the 10 commandments, all the commands, I'm not coming to demolish those, to take those away. I'm telling you how those are important and how we take the heart of the issue. And that is, love God. Put him first in your life. Love him with all of your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. But just like it, we've got to love other people, people that we don't get along with, people that we disagree with. We've got to love them as ourselves. So I got to ask, is that your desire? If not, why not start now? Have a great week. 15th hour.
Like and subscribe.